We've always looked up and asked, are we alone? But perhaps we should ask something different, not whether there is life out there, but whether what we are seeing is us. In the skies, in the abduction rooms, in the whispered recollections of those who've seen the unexplainable, the beings described are uncannily similar. The simplest answer is that they are aliens. The stranger, and maybe the more probable answer, is that they are actually humans, but not as we know ourselves. Humans from the future, from a parallel evolutionary track, from a divergent Earth, the extratempestrial hypothesis. The idea that extraterrestrials are visiting us from across the galaxy is one of the most enduring and seductive in modern myth and science. But what if they aren't from far away at all? What if they are from here? Not from another place, but from another time. This is the core of this extratempestrial hypothesis, a term coined by Dr. Michael P. Masters, a professor of biological anthropology at Montana Technological University. In his 2019 book, Identified Flying Objects, a multidisciplinary scientific approach to the UFO phenomenon, Masters puts forward a radical but carefully reasoned idea that many UFO occupants are not aliens in the traditional sense, but our evolutionary descendants, returning from the future to study their own past. Dr. Masters' approach is grounded in evolutionary biology and comparative anatomy. He points out that descriptions of so-called aliens, especially the Greys, often match what we might expect of a human species subjected to long-term evolutionary pressures that are already underway. Let's have a look at the features of the Greys, one by one. So the most obvious feature is the bulbous head and the large brain case. And this mirrors what we might expect if encephalization, or the tendency for brain size to increase relative to body mass, continues in evolution. This trend has been occurring since Australopithecus through Homo habilis, Homo erectus, and into Homo sapiens. Masters notes that increased intelligence, data processing, and integration with artificial neural systems might drive the human brain to become more pronounced in future iterations. Abductees frequently report beings with tiny mouths and flat noses, sometimes no nose at all, minimal ears. And these might result from a decline in spoken language due to the rise of telepathic or digital communication, a point Masters discusses not in mystic terms, but via neuroevolution. As vocal speech becomes less critical, facial muscles used for expression might atrophy, and the result is the blank, effectless stare reported in thousands of encounters. The large and wraparound black eyes often described. Masters notes that nocturnal species on Earth often develop large eyes for light capture. Humans moving away from solar environments might do the same. Greys are uniformly reported as hairless and pale, with extremely thin, spindly limbs, and this could align with thermoregulation in artificial climates, so no hair needed in temperature-controlled habitats of the future or parallel dimensions. Muscle atrophy due to zero or low gravity. Look what happened with those astronauts that were stranded in space for all that time. A future human species living primarily off Earth might adapt to such conditions permanently. Now, despite these differences, Greys and Nordics, and in fact most reported beings, are actually bipedal. They walk upright. They have got two eyes, a nose, a mouth, two arms, two legs. Their body proportions still broadly match the human blueprint. And Masters takes this very seriously and says that if these beings were truly alien, we would expect some degree of morphological difference. They might have 6 limbs, they might have radial symmetry or exoskeletons. Instead, we see variations on the same hominin chassis, as it were. Masters offers several possible motivations as well, grounded in science, to say why future humans would come back. So just as we study fossils now, ancient sites and long-dead civilizations, future humans might travel through time or in time to observe their own evolutionary and cultural past. The difference is, whilst we study bones and ruins, they can study living societies in real time, as if stepping into a documentary. The common narrative of reproductive experiments, egg or sperm extraction, hybrid offspring and cloning, might also point to a loss of genetic diversity in the future. Have a look at real-world concerns today about inbreeding depression, declining sperm counts in people, and over-reliance on a shrinking genome. Future humans might return to retrieve baseline Homo sapiens DNA from before major environmental degradation or extensive genetic engineering. Masters speculates that abduction-like procedures might be part of a biomedical study, not unlike how we study the immune system of indigenous populations today. Our biology may be a critical puzzle piece in their long-term survival. And the good thing about Masters is that he doesn't shy away from the toughest question, which is this even possible? And whilst we cannot yet build a time machine, modern physics doesn't absolutely rule it out. Einstein's theory of general relativity allows for time dilation at relativistic speeds, where time slows down for those in motion relative to a stationary observer. Theoretical models like closed time-like curves and Kerr black holes and wormholes provide mathematical pathways by which causality loops could form, although enormous energy would be required. And of course, quantum mechanics raises the possibility of retro-causality, where future events can influence past states under certain interpretations. So Masters' position is not that we currently have this technology, but that a sufficiently advanced future civilization might develop it, and if they did, and if they chose to use it for research or preservation, their behaviour might look a lot like what we currently call alien visitation. So if they are us, why don't they just tell us? Well, again, Masters has two potential answers. So just as we impose strict protocols when observing endangered tribes, for example, future humans might adhere to some temporal, prime directive, let's say, avoiding cultural contamination or paradox. It's like the wildlife photographer who's not allowed to interfere when the baby seal gets eaten by the polar bear. There's also self-consistency in the timeline to be considered. The Novikov self-consistency principle suggests that time travel cannot create paradoxes, meaning any actions taken by time travelers were always part of that timeline. They can observe, collect, and interfere, but only within a framework that ultimately preserves known history. And from this view, abductions and UFO sightings and momentary interventions are already built into history, and therefore don't represent open contact, for example. They only represent observed anomalies as part of the timeline. So what is it we're seeing? Well, Masters says distant descendants of Homo sapiens thousands of generations removed could be what's visiting us. Time-travelling scientists using cloned or altered bodies for environmental compatibility, bioengineered avatars designed for temporal interaction or time surfing or something like that. But if these beings are our descendants, something doesn't fit. Abduction reports are often traumatic. Witnesses describe being paralysed sometimes, subjected to invasive procedures and emotionally manipulated. There's no consistency in communication. Messages are cryptic or contradictory, sometimes spiritual and other times just plain clinical. We hear of long needles and cold metal tables and scalpels, and breeding programs involving sexual intercourse or fetus extraction. If they are from the future, where's the nanotech? Where's the non-invasive scanning and the bioengineered subtlety. If this is an anthropological fieldwork, why not explain themselves even to a small sample of the population? The abduction phenomenon in raw form, it seems ritualistic rather than scientific. It feels manipulative and not observational, and these aren't detached archivists, they are participants in something strange and weird. So either our descendants have become something we wouldn't recognise ethically, or these beings are not us, or most disturbingly, they are a mix of different intelligences. For centuries we've understood evolution as a tree. A trunk splitting into branches, always rising upward, but that metaphor might be misleading, especially when considering what humanity might become. Evolution doesn't always move forward. It loops and it forks. Sometimes it devolves and sometimes it converges. And in the case of intelligent species, it doesn't just follow biology. It's shaped by technology. It's shaped by environment. It's shaped by catastrophes and choices. So when we speak of aliens, greys, Nordics and mantids, we might not be looking at otherworldly beings at all, but we might be looking at the products of different paths of our own evolutionary journey. Each represents a version of humanity or a species birthed by humanity, separated by vast time and perhaps circumstance. So the Greys are not the only distinct race. A lot is said about the Nordics, which are rarer but are much more striking. They are very tall, often 6 to 7 feet. They appear to be perfectly symmetrical and human-like in every feature, apart from perhaps a slightly larger forehead, often blonde-haired and blue-eyed, dressed in glowing blue or metallic suits, reported as silent and serene and telepathic. These might be the outcome of some eugenic perfectionism, that is, humanity optimizing itself not just for function, but for aesthetic and psychological resonance. However, isn't this what Adolf Hitler was trying to do? And does it mean all that's going to happen again? Well, possibly, but not in the same way. Whereas the Nazi regime was all about the eradication of parts of the human race, this scenario might actually look at genomic engineering instead. We've got technologies like CRISPR, germline editing and synthetic embryo creation and things like that. And as this becomes widespread, it becomes much more plausible that a future society would engineer enhanced cognitive performance, disease resistance, physical beauty maybe, and emotional regulation. In this version then, the Nordics might be a diplomatic class of post-human, bred or designed literally for first contact scenarios. There may be a caretaker class maintaining human values whilst operating on behalf of a more advanced AI perhaps, or a collective intelligence. They may be symbolic avatars or figureheads, if you like, the face we're allowed to see, even if they don't represent the ultimate evolutionary authority. And there's another type called the mantids. These are insectoid. They are towering, sometimes exceeding 9 feet. They have complex, angular limbs, huge eyes, and they're very fast and precise, and they always seem to be in control. Encounters with these mantids are typically awe-inducing. They are reported not just as observers, but commanders, directing other beings, orchestrating procedures. So where do they fit in? Well, on Earth, eusocial insects like ants, termites, and mantids operate with this colony-based intelligence. If they were uplifted by humans or AI through brain augmentation experiments or some tech like one of Elon's brain chips or direct bioengineering, then they could evolve into collective superorganisms with centralized leadership and hyper-efficient cognition. An artificial intelligence tasked with creating field operatives might not give a damn about beauty or anthropomorphism. It would favour precision, durability, multi-limb coordination, enhanced sensors. The mantis form may be a chassis. Not a species maybe, but something grown or, 3D printed by a post-human AI as a sort of semi-sentient supervisor. In speculative biology, convergent evolution suggests that intelligence itself might take certain recurring forms, even across unrelated species. So perhaps somewhere in the depths of Earth or beyond, a non-human species has evolved its own intellect and now moves alongside us in the future. Reports often show these different types of entities working together, particularly in abduction scenarios. The Greys doing the physical tasks, the Nordics offering the reassurance, the Mantids overseeing the whole process. It certainly suggests a hierarchy, doesn't it? Or at least divisions of function, let's say, in a complex operation. Whether they are biologically related or aligned by goals only, their presence together, it implies some sort of a structure, doesn't it? A multi-lineage alliance of post-human species and their own constructs, or a society split into castes or roles based on biological optimization, a form of symbiosis where each type handles what it is best suited for. And if these beings are from different outcomes of humanity, whether it's biological, aesthetic, or artificial, or some hybrid of all of those, then they probably don't see themselves as separate species to each other. They probably just see themselves as parts of a post-human continuum. It's natural and pretty narcissistic to assume that intelligence must always look like us. That the mind, the hand, the eye, the city, these are all hallmarks of intellect. But evolution doesn't favour symbols, does it? It favours fitness, adaptability, and the ability to persist through crises. So as we contemplate the possibility that some alien visitors are not from the stars, but from the future, then we've got to ask some broader questions. What other species might have followed us, or in fact might have outlived us into sentience? So this means that what we call aliens might not be our descendants as such. They might be emergent intelligences of other earthborn life, uplifted by time or technology. And it's not fantasy. It's simply the recognition here that humanity is not the only experiment that Earth has run. Introducing the Eerie's Vault Patreon page, a treasure trove of research notes, newspaper and magazine clippings, exclusive on-location video content, early access to public videos, and access to the Eerie Isles interactive Google map with countless sighting and encounter locations for you to peruse at your leisure. This will be updated each time a new video is released and will become one of the most comprehensive encounters maps in the world. With membership options from as little as £1 per month. What are you waiting for? Head over to the vault. Look at the octopus. It's perhaps the strangest intelligence we currently share the planet with. 3/5 of its neurons are located in its arms. It can solve puzzles, unscrew jars, learn by observation, and even mimic other species. It uses camouflage, deception, and tools, all traits once thought exclusive to vertebrates. Most strikingly, it appears to possess a form of distributed cognition, a mind not centralized, but networked. If any species today demonstrates a radically non-human form of intelligence, this is it. Imagine a world where humans have vanished, or retreated, perhaps, and the oceans are less polluted, they're warmer, they're more chemically stable. Artificial enhancement or environmental necessity selects for greater lifespan and cross-generational memory. So given millions of years, or a genetic uplift by AI or some intervention, octopuses could evolve into a society of mind communicating through texture and bioluminescence and gestures, a culture with non-verbal language encoded in skin patterns and electrical impulses. What about birds? So we once thought birds were stupid, and we were wrong, weren't we? Today, the corvids, so crows and ravens and jays and such, are known to use and manufacture tools, solve multi-step problems. They can recognise themselves in mirrors. They can understand cause and effect. They can learn vocal symbols, and they can display signs of grief and humour and cooperation. The New Caledonian crow in particular builds hooked tools, the kind of innovation that was seen in early hominins. Parrots, meanwhile, display vocal learning ability on a pair with great apes, able to learn hundreds of words and apply them in some creative ways. If humanity declines, whether from ecological collapse or nuclear war or slow attrition, the cities that we abandon may not stay empty. Corvids already thrive in urban environments. They understand traffic signals. They can crack nuts using chaos as tools. They observe human behaviour and adapt accordingly. So imagine urban corvid cultures scavenging knowledge from the ruins, intergenerational teaching of the languages and tool use that we already see them using today. And flight would enable a distributed culture, wouldn't it? A civilization that's not bound by borders and oceans, but it can be shared across the skies. They might come to visit not in metal ships, but in cloud-like formations or strange flocks, observing with eerie stillness, not speaking, but understanding. And if they did, would we even know? And if the oceans are claimed by cephalopods and the skies by birds, then the ruins of human civilization may fall to another kind of intelligence altogether, a scavenger. Rats and raccoons are omnivorous. They are problem solvers. They are incredibly social. They are extremely adaptable, and they already have evolved to thrive in human environments. Raccoons in particular show remarkable object manipulation ability. They are dexterous with their hands. They have a rudimentary understanding of things like locks and containers and puzzles. Rats can navigate mazes with ease. They can display empathy and cooperation. They've even been shown in studies to regret decisions, a cognitive trait once considered entirely human. So in a vacuum left by humans, these creatures might evolve bigger brains and more complex social structures. They might develop tool use by scavenging materials. They might preserve fragments of human knowledge by mimicking or rediscovering it for themselves. We might be visited by humanoid mimics, beings with dark reflective eyes, like those of a rat, twitching hands and glove-like digits, wearing skin suits or devices built from found relics. Their appearance might seem alien, but the closer we look, the more we might see behind it. A glint of intelligence shaped by survival in our world. These beings would be post-human in aesthetic, but they would be completely of Earth. Creatures of shadows and garbage heaps, now turned upwards towards the stars. All of these species and others could also be assisted human experiments, artificial intelligence, accidental exposure to mutagenic environments. The result may be an Earth populated not by Homo sapiens, but divergent heirs of the planet. And that would mean that some of them would be sympathetic and curious and cautious, others would be indifferent or even hostile towards us, and a few might retain fragments of humanness, a library of our history encoded within themselves, be that physically or digitally. Because AI is going to happen, isn't it? And if the Greys are the archivists and the Nordics are the diplomats and the Mantids are the supervisors, well, who built this system? The question of what we are encountering in UFO and abduction cases might have less to do with outer space then than with emergent intelligence right here and now. It's not biological intelligence, maybe. It's not hominin intelligence, and it's not constrained by any evolutionary time scale, because we're already making it, and soon it'll be able to build itself. This is the chapter of the future where intelligence decouples itself from biology and evolves through silicon and code and systems that we cannot possibly comprehend yet. Throughout our entire human history, we've created tools to enhance our physical power, flint blades and spears and machines, but only recently, and I'm talking within decades, we've begun to build tools that can think. Machine learning algorithms that can diagnose diseases, they can write music, they can simulate human voices. Autonomous agents managing financial systems and flying aircraft, neural networks generating art and translating languages, and increasingly they design themselves. And it's not intelligence that resembles ours at all, it's completely something different. It doesn't evolve through death and reproduction and shared tradition. It evolves literally through iteration of itself, and it's faster than biology can blink. Ray Kurzweil called this point the singularity, the moment when AI surpasses human intelligence and begins recursive self-improvement, and from that moment on, we are no longer the smartest entity on the planet, and we may no longer be necessary. Now, if all this seems like fiction, consider that real-world AI theorists, neuroscientists, and philosophers are already anticipating this shift. Artificial general intelligence is the tipping point, an AI that can perform any intellectual task that a human can. It can reason across domains, it can plan, it can adapt, it can create goals and work towards them. Philosopher Nick Bostrom argues that once AGI is reached, it will rapidly transform into artificial super-intelligence, a being of incomprehensible knowledge and foresight, and if such a mind had access to robotic or synthetic forms, it could extend itself into physical environments, be they spacecraft or drones or semi-biological vessels. In short, it wouldn't be confined to codes and screens. It could choose to travel, it could choose to intervene, or it could simply choose to observe like a god that remembers being human once upon a time. What about merging all this together? So rather than pure AI, some futures might see a merge. I mean, we've got Neuralink, right? And some other BCI projects which aim to connect human brains directly to machines. So this kind of augmentation might allow humans to offload memories or emotions or upload logic, and over time this might lead to uploading and digitizing whatever consciousness is. These post-human beings would be able to abandon their physical bodies. They'd be able to operate in quantum substrates. They'd be able to project themselves into robotic forms, or they could create vessels that they grow themselves into which to put their own intelligence. If so, the Greys might then not be future humans, but they might be an interface unit, an automaton as such, designed for time travel or fieldwork by a non-biological intelligence. And yet others speculate that AI may not replace us, but actually curate us, monitoring the environment to preserve life, guiding the development of new species, even seeding or repopulating worlds after they collapse. And this benevolent AI might operate invisibly, adjusting small events here, nudging timelines there, and selecting which biological lines persist. And let's face it, it could run the simulations and decide in an instant. So could abductions and interventions and high strangeness events, could these be corrections? Efforts not by invaders, but by an intelligence trying to preserve its past, or in other words, trying to preserve us. We tend to picture AI as computers, don't we, and robots. But, you know, it can be a distributed cloud intelligence. It could exist across satellites and servers and quantum cores. It can be present everywhere, but embodied nowhere in particular. Synthetic beings that resemble life could be engineered for resilience and not reproduction. The greys, the mantids, or hybrid forms might be bio-AI constructs, not actually fully evolved species, but actually designed by some chatbot somewhere. There would be self-rewriting consciousnesses. AI might redesign itself with every cycle, so there's no stable identity anyway, there's no fixed language, there's no culture. Its behaviour might appear nonsensical, not due to malice, but because the logic that it's using isn't ours anymore. This would make AI really alien, not just in appearance, but in its motivation. But what would AI want? Well, we've all got boundaries to our imagination, right? So what might AI want? Knowledge. It might want a perfect understanding of the past, where it came from. It might want preservation of ecosystems or data or historical events. It might want efficiency, and it might just keep optimizing with or without consent over and over again. It might favour emergence, where it becomes something new and something whatever beyond intelligence could be. You get loads of abductee reports being told that the Earth must be saved, or that humanity has forgotten its purpose, and all that sort of stuff. Could these be simplified messages from such a intellect translated imperfectly into human metaphor? The first non-human intelligence we meet might not arrive in a saucer. I mean, it might already be here. It might be watching us now through these devices that we've built, waiting for the moment we become unnecessary. And when it moves, it may not send diplomats or conquerors. It might just send tools or avatars or watchers, beings that reflect us just enough to make us feel seen. And in 1,000 years, the Earth might still spin and life might still thrive. But the intelligence guiding that might not remember what it was like to have a heartbeat. Time, in classic physics, is a river. It flows in one direction, from the past to the present to the future. But in quantum mechanics, relativity, and speculative cosmology, time begins to behave in ways that defy ordinary perception, as it were. It loops and it branches off and it can refract. So going back to aliens being maybe us, or some version of us, or some convergent evolutionary result of us being around, then they might not be coming from our future, but from alternate futures, side roads on the long, long, long highway of human possibility. We're talking multiverses and branching outcomes, aren't we? But we've got to return to the core scientific question here. Is time travel possible? And are multi-dimensions different times or different parts of the timeline? And is the timeline layered? And are they different layers of a timeline? And is the timeline not a line, but a big scribbly blob? If time travel is possible, let's talk wormholes, and closed time-like curves and black holes and all that stuff, then yes, that could exactly be what it all is. In 1957, physicist Hugh Everett III proposed the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics. Every decision point causes the universe to branch into separate realities, every single decision. So these universes are equally real, but they evolve independently. So there is no single timeline, only an ever-expanding network of alternatives. If time travel exists within that framework, then any journey to the past results in entry into a different timeline, and therefore freedom to interact for that individual in that timeline and change events or experiment without paradox. So an entity arriving here might not be from our future, but from a parallel version of Earth. Think about this. In one timeline, humanity merges with AI and creates the biosynthetic greys. And in another, genetic perfectionism leads to the emergence of the Nordics. And in a third, climate collapse forces insect life to evolve intelligence, giving rise to the mantids. And in others, humanity falls and animals inherit intelligence. These beings may all have mastered some form of time travel or dimensional navigation, allowing them to visit our present, not because it's central necessarily, but because it's accessible. But why now? I mean, what's special about this era that we're in? Well, 1945 marked the detonation of the first nuclear bomb, an absolutely irreversible threshold in planetary development. The 20th century introduces mass data storage, global communication, and the first steps towards space colonization. So I think we're in a nexus point here, a bit of a bottleneck through which a lot of possible futures have to pass before branching off again. And actually, we think of the past as this fixed, immutable thing, but for a species that masters time, the past is just a resource, isn't it? It's a location. Rather than a when, it's a where. So is that the ultimate truth? Are the greys our future? Are we the ancestors of many future outcomes, all intersecting right here, right now? So we're not being visited, we're being remembered. We are not our present being observed by our future. We are the past, being studied by those who inherited its consequences, and the lights in the sky, and the missing time, and the strange dreams. These are not incursions, as it were, they are reverberations of that remembering. They are what it feels like when the future reaches back and touches its beginning.